Good afternoon and welcome to Fort Ligonier's 18th century military encampment. My name is Erica Knuckles. I'm the Director of History and Collections here at Fort Ligonier. And thank you so much for being here on this beautiful Memorial Day weekend. We have a wonderful group of reenactors here this weekend who represent the French and Indian War, which was the North American theater of the 7 Years' War, which was considered to be the First World War. So this weekend, we also have units that represent that global fight as well, that were not ever here in North America, but were fighting the same global war that was going on, known as the 7 Years' War. We also have the 8th Pennsylvania Regiment encamped here this weekend from the Revolutionary War. Because the French and Indian War, the global 7 Years' War, and the American Revolution are all very related. We would not have had the American Revolution if it weren't for the French and Indian War and the global 7 Years' War. Wars are expensive, and in order to pay for the 7 Years' War, which the French and Indian War was a part of, the idea of taxation of the colonists without representation came up, which led to the American Revolution. The 7 Years' War at its time was the most expensive war to date. So the entire World War, the 7 Years' War, began right here in Western Pennsylvania. It was between the British and the French, who were both trying to control the Ohio River Valley at a place that we call Pittsburgh today. If you controlled those 3 rivers, you controlled trade and land for thousands of miles. Now, they both had Native American allies, and soon the war spread, where there was fighting in the Caribbean, South America, Europe, Africa, India, and as far away as the Philippines, making it the First World War. So down here we have some Prussian soldiers. Now, Prussia was allied with Great Britain during the 7 Years' War, and they were primarily fighting in Europe, so they never would have been seen here in North America, but were the main ally of Great Britain. So it seems they have spotted some enemy attackers. And there was a battle here in 1758 on October 12th when the French and Indian allies attacked the British fort here, Fort Ligonier, when it was still under construction. So they seem to have spotted, you can hear the force that's outside the fort encroaching. So they're going up to warn the rest of the garrison. Now, when the French would attack a fort like Fort Ligonier, they did not let them know they were going to come. So the fort would be busy doing their daily activities and would have to drop whatever they were doing in order to respond to any attack that was happening here. Because the soldiers did much more than just train and fight. They built the road here, they built the fort, they baked the bread, They were making uniforms. They were doing all sorts of different activities as part of their daily life. But they had to be prepared at a moment's notice to respond to an attack. And it seems that the French have some artillery as they are encroaching on the fort. And that seems to have blown the gate open to allow them to breach the outer wall or retrenchment of the fort. So see, even if you can't see it, you can hear it and you can smell it. Now here comes our French milice leading the way. The milice were like the militia of Canada, of New France. They often adopted not regular uniforms, but more of the Native American dress. And then behind them are the French Marines and our French artillery crew. Now the tactics were dictated by their weapons, which were smoothbore muskets, which aren't always terribly accurate, but when fired all at once in what's called a volley, you're more likely to hit your target. They can also be reloaded very rapidly, about 3 to 5 times a minute. A good soldier could fire his musket that many times. And then you see our opposing force that's defending the fort are the Prussians. And the Prussian army had some of the best trained soldiers in the world. Also with our French troops is an Austrian officer. He has the large black hat on. So Austria was also an ally of France. Other countries that were allied with France, like Austria that you wouldn't see here in North America but would be fighting in Europe, included Sweden, Russia, Saxony, and the Holy Roman Empire. And one of the main reasons they end up fighting all over the world is this is a war for empire. They're in North America because the British and the French are expanding their global influence and trade network, creating large settlements like in British North America. And so then they end up in places like India and Africa and the Caribbean, all these different places because of the colonies that were held in those places by the British and the French and the Spanish. So the goal of the Prussians is to try to push them back out of the fort, since they've breached the outer wall. Now this fort, like many 18th century forts, was designed with rings of defense. So beyond the outer retrenchment that you're just within, there also would have been mini forts called redoubts along the perimeter of this fort. Fort Ligonier also has natural defenses. The cliffs that go down to what's Route 30 now used to go all the way down to the Loyalhanna Creek, which was moved in the 1950s. And then the inner fort was designed, the whole fort was designed then to protect the supplies, because at its peak there were over 5,000 people with the British Army here in 1758. And this was the middle of nowhere. They were on their way to take the French stronghold at Fort Duquesne. And between here and Philadelphia, about every 50 miles, the British Army had built a fortification to protect their supply line. You can have the best trained army in the world, but if you cannot feed them or provide them with other supplies, they aren't going to do you very much good. It's a tiny gun, but it's quite powerful. And we will be doing another artillery demonstration at 2 o'clock today, where you can learn more about the artillery of the 18th century. Artillery was very helpful when you were trying to take a fort, because you could essentially try to bomb the fort out in order to then take the fort. In 1758, in order to prepare to take Fort Duquesne, General John Forbes, who was in charge of that campaign, had amassed a great quantity of artillery here in preparation for putting Fort Duquesne under siege. You can hear the drummer that the Prussian unit has. Instruments like drums and fifes and trumpets, things like this could really be loud over the gunfire during a very intense battle with hundreds or thousands of soldiers. And it tells you what to do. And a soldier, they often say, sort of lived by the drum. It told you when to wake up, when to take a break, when to have lunch, what you do in battle. So it was sort of like knowing another language. And our Prussian drummer has a very fancy red laced coat. The musicians often had very sort of bright coats so that they could be identified during the battle. And they were very important members of the army. Now we have a couple of casualties so far during the battle, although we are just doing a demonstration. This is all just pretend today. But it was disease that actually killed more soldiers than battle in the 18th century. See, a couple of the artillery crew have been frightened off. They've abandoned their posts. If they're caught, they may be court-martialed for cowardice. And now the Prussians are charging. But the French have one last shot with their cannon as the rest of the French troops are repelled from the fort. So it seems the Prussians have held the fort for today. And they're going to abandon their gun and retreat as well. Now let's give a great round of applause to our wonderful living historians. They have traveled from all around to be here today, from Indiana, Virginia, Alabama, all over the country, because they just love this history and sharing it with you. So please spend time in their camps today. And if you all could just stay off the battlefield while we clear it, you're welcome to take the walkway up and down. And we thank you so much for being here to commemorate the military history of the United States and really of the world that we're remembering today, this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you so much.